at that point, you're not there to play it safe. Like if you're not taking risks, you're not competing.
It's empowering. I mean, anybody who's done a CrossFit workout, you finish your CrossFit workout and you're like, I'm on top of the world.
Yeah.
Like a hunger for competition and like that super intense structure, routine. I still had that desire.
Listen to the way people feel and the motivations for doing the things that they did. It was like they were describing me to a T.
I'm not trying to solve everything for you, but I know that sometimes you just need somebody to listen.
Learned the most is how to fill my cup by filling others.
Welcome to the Hungry Dog Barbell Podcast. Join me as I talk with passionate people about their life's failures and successes, and most importantly, what keeps them hungry for more.
My son graduated from college and moved back home. And in 2008, he was talking about this new workout that he'd found online, and it was called CrossFit.
Wow.
And it had him doing, body weight lunges in the backyard. And we had kind of a pull-up bar, but not really. So we were, he would try to do stuff there.
Yeah.
And so I kind of dabbed at it a little bit. But at the time I was a rower,
right.
a very serious rower. And
wait, what year was this? Did you say?
This was like 2008.
Okay.
2009, I went to my hometown, Ames, Iowa, and they had a CrossFit gym.
Where were you guys living? Were you living here? Or?
Oh, sorry, yeah. We were living in the Wilmington area. At that point, we were in Landenberg, Pennsylvania, which is kind of actually near Newark, Delaware.
Okay.
And so went back to my hometown, and there was a CrossFit gym, CrossFit Ames, and I thought, oh, I know this from my son. And
right.
They didn't have a rowing club in Ames for me to work out with, so I went there and I did a few workouts with them. And I remember the very first workout I did there, it was just me and one other person in a class. And I don't remember the whole workout, but one of the things in there was you had to get through 50 pull-ups. And I'm pretty good on, I didn't know a kipping or a butterfly or whatever. So
no one did at that time.
You're right. I did my, guy pull-ups, and I was pretty good at it. Well, this other person, she did know how to kip. So I was ahead of her after, I think it was wall balls, and I think there was rowing, which I'm good at and all that. And then I died in the pull-ups. I mean, I just died. She blew right through me. Well, she was also a friend of my sister's. So kind of word got, she was married to a friend of my sister, something like that.
Some kind of close connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So anyway, it was kind of, first of all, it was a wake-up call for me, because I thought, I've always been active, and with rowing, I was a pretty competitive rower.
Right.
And all that. And so I thought I was in really good shape, and I just got, my doors blown off by this person. And so I was kind of intrigued. But again, I came back here, and at that point, there weren't CrossFit gyms, at least that I was aware of, near me.
Yeah.
And I was really heavily into rowing, so I just sort of went back to rowing.
Right. Like that was enough for you.
That was kind of enough for me and all that. And then now the kind of real answer to your question is, now flash forward to 2016, I had retired from AstraZeneca, and my wife had just retired. And one of the first things we were going to do with us both retired was go out to my son and his family in the Seattle area for a month. We got in the car, we drove across, we planned all sorts of neat bicycle rides as we drove across country, and then we were going to spend a month with our grandchildren. They had a rowing club out there, and so I wanted to row with them, but for a variety of reasons, we couldn't make that work out.
Right.
You kind of have to go when the boats go, and that didn't work, all that. And I knew by then enough about CrossFit to know that they have rowing machines. And so I just looked up online, where's the nearest one to where my son lived.
Like a drop-in.
Yep. And just said, hey, I'm going to be here for a month. Can I come in? Can I use your rowing machines? He goes, sure. But you're also welcome to jump into class. And I thought, okay, so I went in the first day intending to row, but it was some pretty accessible workout. I don't remember what it was. And it was sort of the 8:30 or 9 o'clock, something like that class. And it tended to be 4 guys who kind of ranged in age from about 40 to mid-50s. And they were all about having me in class. And for the next month, I had an absolute blast. So my on-ramp was a month of those guys kind of helping me out.
I was going to say, did you ever do any formal on-ramp or fundamentals before that?
No.
Oh, man. That's a great way to do it. That's kind of just the genuine and authentic way to lead someone through how to be, I think you put it perfectly earlier, have an accessible CrossFit class.
Yeah.
Right. So that's great. Keep going.
Yeah. So, so they were terrific. And then on the way home, my wife said, you had more fun in that month of doing CrossFit than you've had in the last several years of rowing. So I've been doing rowing for a really long time at that point. And I love rowing, love my rowing experience, highly recommend it to anybody. But it's one thing when you do it for that many years. And then plus a lot of the guys that I had rowed with and we had a lot of success in team boats were gradually
easing out of it.
Yeah, they were either done with it or they moved because their job changed or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of becoming not as fun for me.
Yeah. And
so when I got back, I went online and I looked for the CrossFit gym that was the closest to the Wilmington Rowing Center, which is where I rowed out of, because I thought, well, I'll use CrossFit as a way to get in shape for rowing, and I'll
go back there. It'll be close enough,
I was kind of keeping my feet in both camps a little bit there.
That's funny.
And that was Riv Athletics, CrossFit Riverfront. And then for the last 7 years, I've been...
You found a home.
I found a home.
That's
I found
awesome.
a tribe. So
I have a funny question for you. As someone with a large rowing history, when you first walked into CrossFit gyms and when you still walk into them now, what are your thoughts on how CrossFitters genuinely row?
So it's a mix. So there are some CrossFitters who row incredibly badly, and there are also CrossFitters who row really surprisingly well. There's like I've judged games athletes, and I'm not going to mention name, but one of them is a games athlete who I just think has the most horrifically bad rowing technique, but he puts up surprisingly good. He's just so strong.
Yeah.
Probably if we were to go for a long run, it would wear, but for any distance you're going to do, he's just so strong and fit.
Yeah.
Equally, there's a member at my gym who doesn't have any particular athletic background, has never touched an oar or anything like that. She rows absolutely just
lights out
beautifully.
That's
it's
amazing.
just beautiful. Doesn't generate as much power as some, but just absolutely rows really well. So, the answer to your question is it's a mixed bag. But that's okay. I think it's, you've got a strong weightlifting bag. It's probably similar to what you see.
I was just going to say that. It's very similar to that. Like, barring coaching, because that can change anything, like some people just lend themselves to pick it up, being able to have the mechanics to row, and some people just don't,
Yeah.
I was just thinking that. That's funny you said that. So on the other side of it, you were talking about, like, from your rowing history, guys that you would row with, they start to, like, slow down and stuff. Why didn't you slow down? Like, where does your competitiveness come from? Like, have you always been that way?
So, I was listening to one of your podcast episodes, and the person said, well, I don't think of myself as competitive, but others might say, I'm going to lean right in. I'm absolutely competitive. I've always been competitive from the time I was young. I was the guy who got thrown out of tennis camp because I was throwing my racket.
Yes.
And I may or may not occasionally still throw a jump rope because double unders are a weakness for me, and I get frustrated. So you can be in your 60s and still get that way. So very, very competitive. And in fact, the real reason that I CrossFit is, of course, because I want to live as long and a high quality life as I can.
Right.
The thing that gets me in to do that work is the fact that I've got a chance to compete doing it. I think if I just had to show up to a gym and just had classes and there was nothing to compete for, I would gradually kind of
like slow down too.
I would
or try to find something else where you could find that itch, right?
Find something else where I could find that itch or whatever. But I know with rowing, because my friends moved on and all that, and the boats, and it was tended to be the boats were kind of getting a little, and I started making excuses, and I needed something I could compete in.
Yeah.
And that's what helps me get in to do the work that will hopefully let me live longer, higher quality life.
Lend itself to all the bigger goals and all that. Yeah. So what sports did you start off with when you were younger? Was rowing the first one, or did you play ball sports? No,
I didn't actually pick up rowing until I was in my 30s. So when I was younger, so I grew up in Iowa. So as a male in Iowa, I don't think there's a law that says you have to do wrestling, but a lot of guys wrestle, and I did. I started at a very young age. And then tennis, and then baseball. I made sort of a brief tries at sort of soccer and football. So kind of all around things. Tennis, I got pretty serious. I played in kind of some local USTA tournaments and stuff like that.
Oh, tennis is serious.
But if I look back to what I was in high school, I just I didn't grow. So I was very, very small. I was 4'10" as a sophomore in high school.
Wow.
And I kind of fell behind a lot of the other kids athletically. It's hard to be, I was in baseball. I was a catcher. Well, not a lot of 4'10" catchers.
Big leagues, yeah.
And but I'm going to take a big part of it on me. I kind of developed one of those, poor me, I've got an excuse to quit kind of attitude. And so if I could change one thing about my high school experience, it would be hang in there.
Right.
Turns out I'm a decent runner. You can cross country, and there are plenty of 4'10" people who were like really good at cross. But I didn't do any of that. I just sort of backed away from it.
A lot of the kids that you see really become successful and cherish sports later on in their life are ones that just did it because they love to move generally.
Well, and I think, and so wrestling. So there's a guy named Lee Kemp. I don't know if you ever heard of Lee.
No.
Lee is, if you're making a list of the top 10 American wrestlers of all time, he's on there and he might be near the top.
Wow.
Lee went out for basketball because that's who he wanted to go out for in high school. Didn't make the team, and his parents said, well, you're going to go out for something. And so he went in and tried wrestling, and a year or two later, he won an Ohio State championship, and he might have won a second one, and then he went to college, and he was a 3-time NCAA champ, and then he wrestled world. And it's all because, the sport that he really wanted to be good at was basketball, but
just wasn't for him.
But then he's literally in the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And I think if I would have had that mindset, I wouldn't have been successful to that degree, I'm sure, but I think I would have found some more success. It's just kind of a part of my life that I kind of wish I would have done a little differently.
One of the things you look back on.
Yeah.
When do you think you start to have those like revelations, like to change that mindset?
I think it was sort of I kind of grew into it as an adult. So maybe you can say I got the maturity in my 30s and 40s that I should have had when I was in my teens or something. But when my kids got a little bit older, I started playing volleyball, and turned out I was pretty good. I ended up on a USAVB team, and for a handful of years there, we competed in USAVB regionals, and one year we qualified for nationals and all that. And then I kind of got burned out on volleyball, and again, same thing. Guys started moving on a lot, so that's when I found rowing. And then rowing kind of continued then kind of through my 40s and 50s. And I think just along that process, like in rowing, is kind of a good example of what you're talking about. I was there at a very fortunate time when we had guys who had been in national camp. They rowed in college. They were in national camp. They were 6'4". They were, really, really. And I had no such background. But
you picked it up late.
I picked it up late, right? I started when I was like 35. And, but the rowing machine, they call it the row erg now.
Right.
And it's the truth. And I was very good on that. And especially if you adjusted for my weight. So a lot of times I would be the last guy in the boat, but I was in a boat with a bunch of other guys who had rowed in college and all that. And I got to where I was not the last guy in the boat on a lot of them. And we had an awful lot of success. And I look back at it now, if that moment would have come, if a similar moment to that would have come to me in high school, I would have said, oh, these guys are too big. They're too good. They're
would have walked away.
I would have walked away. I would have quit. And I didn't. And, it was an awesome time of my life. I got to experience a lot of really neat things because of it.
That's really important too. Like a lot of times we let like our guilt from a past mistake hinder what could be a success in something else, right? Like we never forgive ourselves. Like sometimes you just got to learn the lesson and then like apply it the next time, and that's what you were able to do. Like throughout your whole life. So that's really really important. So how did you stay in shape like before rowing and then throughout that whole time? Like did you have like an exercise routine you did before, like when you were playing volleyball?
So I always had something, but it wouldn't necessarily be something that we would recognize. Like while I was playing volleyball, I had some weights in my basement, and I did a kind of 3 nights a week. I would go down and do kind of basic strength training.
Yeah.
I would occasionally, I would go to gyms, or I would play tennis, or I always was active. But when your kids are little, that's
the activity.
That's a lot of the activity. And So kind of through volleyball, I would say it was hit or, volleyball itself, and especially if you're playing 2-man volleyball. So I was better at 6-man volleyball, the indoor.
Yeah.
But then I did play some 2-man, and
do they play those on smaller fields and courts, 2-man? Oh my God!
No,
you could expect to have to defend the whole.
You have to defend the whole thing. It's a lot of, and especially if you do it in sand, because a lot of it's sand volleyball.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and that's good from you can dive for the ball and not get injured perspective.
Right.
But try to move in sand, try to jump in sand,
be
and
agile
do it over and over and over and over again. I didn't play as much sand, and as a result, I did. So when I did play kind of in a serious sand tournament, typically I would get gassed.
Right.
And my partner, who would typically play a lot, was kind of going, let's go.
Let's do it. Let's run it back. Yeah, that's funny. That would be me.
So, and that was kind of me. So you would describe me as an active person through my, kind of up to 35, but I wouldn't have passed a lot of fitness. I wouldn't have scored very high in fitness tests if you could measure it.
Far cry from where you are now, right? Yeah. Even though you're older. So now let's bring it back up to, I think you said 2016. You get to Riv. What's it like assimilating there into the everyday classes and everything? Was that process seamless?
So, you know what, it was. And Riv has kind of a younger clientele. So they're right near, so the Riverfront, when I was rowing, there was nothing there. There was a bar called the Big Kahuna.
Yeah.
And there was the Wilmington Rowing Center, and that was about it.
Now it's beautiful.
And now it's beautiful. And a lot of young professionals kind of start their, careers with, renting or buying a place there.
Right there.
So you get a lot of very young people. And I walked in, and I'm older than everybody, and I'm older than a lot of their parents even. And I kind of kept looking almost for, they're not going to accept me because I'm old. And it absolutely didn't happen. The very first day, the very first coach of my first class is still one of my really good friends. And she, right up, introduced herself, tried to help me with stuff. And within the first week, they were talking, they were very good about, here's what you can work on.
That's awesome.
And, they were really terrific. In that same class was another person who's still a really good friend of mine, who we kind of came up through the ranks on. She's a way better athlete than me. And said just nothing but encouraging and, looking for chances to work out with you. And so very, they couldn't have cared less that I was 58 years old at the time. It was just, hey, here's another guy who wants to drink the Kool-Aid with us.
You have a knack of walking somewhere and finding a home. I mean, hopefully, ideally, all CrossFit gyms are going to be like that, right? But it seems like you found two great ones, in two very different places. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, I did. And to be honest with you, as part of this journey, so, CrossFit Riverfront is my home, but I've worked out at a number of others, and they've all been really great to me.
That's awesome. So, speaking about the journey, what's the first competition that you see that you're able to maybe not be a part of or just be a spectator at? Was it the rivalry? I know they've been having that for a while there.
No, so this predates that. So the first competition I ever did was Festivus down in
Center City somewhere. Is it?
Well, no, this was down in Smyrna. I want to say Delaware.
Okay.
So I did that and kind of did okay. I made the last 5 or whatever, and then it's like that. That's kind of not so bad. And then occasionally I would partner up with somebody when we hosted a thing at the Riv. A couple times I did that. But there really aren't a lot of competitions for 58, 59, 60-year-olds. So the big leap of faith that I took was Granite Games had a qualifier, and this is the last year they were at St. Cloud's. This is 2019, and I did the qualifier, and I didn't make the original cut. But then they said a couple people had turned down their invitations, and so they invited a couple more, and then one more turned down their invitations. And when I had been on vacation the year before out in Lake Tahoe, I had dropped in at a gym there. There was a guy named Del LaFountain who was there. Del's a 4-time games athlete. And as my son put it, so when one unicorn meets another. So immediately he saw that I was, 60 and he was 6. And so even though he was a games athlete and I was a nothing who had just barely discussed, he was, great. And he helped me with stuff and all that.
Awesome.
We got connected. And I think he played a role in getting him to extend me an invitation, even though I had kind of, didn't make the first or I think even second cut. And I remember the toughest thing I had to do was get in my car.
What was the age division then? Like what?
60 plus.
60 plus at 2019 Granite Games?
Correct.
Sweet.
And so I decided to drive out there because, again, I've got family and when I thought, okay, after the games, then I'll go stop there. And I remember the hardest thing I had to do was get in that car and go out because I didn't know any of these guys. Yeah. And I had never been to any real competition. In fact, the week before there was a little local one that was held, and I entered it just to
shake it off.
Be in a competition. And I drove out there to St. Cloud, and I remember I walked in, and they, again, same thing. They couldn't have been more accepting. Hey, come on over here. Here's where we're set up. Or, you're more, and introducing me to everybody that was there. And I ended up with one event to go. I was in second place. Which was like, and everybody's going, who is this guy? And I'm going, what's happening?
You were like, who is this guy too?
Right. And then in the last event, but I remember the announcer never called my name all week because there were other games athletes, whatever. And then in the very last event, it was sandbags, sandbag cleans, and rope climbs. And I thought I knew how to climb ropes, but it turned out I was, even though I was quote using my feet, I really wasn't using my feet. I was pretty much doing, yeah. Well, that works until it doesn't. And so I did the first 3, and then I did another one, and then I kind of had one of them where I sort of stopped halfway and I started slipping because the ropes, I think they called it the regional rig at the time, and the ropes were a little bit thicker, first of all, so that's a grip thing. And I was getting tired, and so I had to redo a no rep on a rope climb is
so costly.
It is. And then I had to go out and do more sandbag cleans, and on the last rope climb, I remember I struggled, came back, couldn't get up. Well, that's the point. Don't you know? That's when the announcer said, "Okay, and that's Mark Peters out there."
Figured out who you are.
Yeah, let's give him a big round of applause because everybody else had finished. I thought it's like
he caught up
now.
Yeah.
And I ended up that actually ended up. The third and fourth were just like a point or two behind me, and that put them ahead.
That was enough, yeah.
So, but it was an incredibly positive experience,
right? It was just the start,
and then I did MFCC the next year, and then Legends the year after that, and and then every year, of course, doing the Open and age group qualifier,
right? Everything leading up to
and it just it kind of kept building, and I guess the funny thing, if you're, kind of to segue, I guess, a little bit into the run up to the games for this year, so now they've got a 65 plus division, and I turned 65 this last June. So as of last summer, I thought, okay, well, this next year is it's going to be my time to shine,
right?
Especially in the older groups, when you're the youngest age, that's the best time.
Right? Yeah.
Well, so the summer of 22, I was out in Seattle, and my right knee had been really bothering me. It was getting worse. I was trying to play with my grandson. I couldn't kick soccer balls with, he would kick it, and I couldn't move on it. And he's like, "Come on, Pepe."
Yeah.
And getting up and down stairs was hurting, and it was hurting me at night and all that. And I remember on the trip home, I just thought, all right, this is ridiculous. CrossFit is supposed to be helping me do better at life, and not make it worse. And, forget about competing for right now. Let's try to get this fixed. And so I went to a doctor, sports medicine, MD, and then worked with a PT, and I spent the rest of the fall PTing.
Of 22.
Yeah, fall of 22, right. PTing, and I still would go into the CrossFit gym, but initially I stopped anything with an impact. So no double unders, no box jumps, no running, no anything. And at first, even anything with any form of squatting, even kind of controlled, we're going to take all that off, which takes out a lot of CrossFit movements.
Probably over half, yeah.
But it started feeling better, and then about January, it was like, okay, it's 90% of the pain is gone, and I kind of started my training. Well, the Open starts in February.
Right.
And I thought, okay, so I'm feeling pretty good, but I know I'm undertrained.
Yeah.
And
That's all it takes sometimes too, is that little bit of doubt in yourself.
Yeah. Well, and then I went into the Open and I did better than I've ever done.
There you go.
And then I went to the quarterfinals and I did better than I'd ever done. And I got a penalty, but I was still good enough to make it to the semis.
Yeah.
And then in the semis, I made it to the games. And I think, sort of the lesson that I learned from that is I don't think I was undertrained this year. I think I was overtrained in the other years. And I wouldn't have listened to anybody telling me that. I think I had to learn it.
Yeah, you had to find it out by your body.
Yeah. That's it. It was a surprise to me, but
did you feel like undertrained, like physically, or was it just like a mental thing? Can you remember that at all? Like after the pain went away, when you were mostly pain free, did you feel like...
So mostly mentally, I think, to answer your question. Mostly there was just a sense of I hadn't made it to the games before, and now I'm doing less than I was doing. So obviously I'm undertrained and, using the immutable logic. Right,
which would be like a completely logical narrative, right? That would be the typical narrative someone would have in their brain, but what you said before is a hard lesson to learn, but it can only be learned through the effort of it, I guess, the time of going through it.
I honestly, at least I was not smart enough, well enough informed, aware enough of my body, whatever, to kind of recognize that maybe I needed to train in a different way before.
How were the other aspects of your life? Were your sleep and your eating and all that stuff throughout the time that you weren't training as much? Did that stuff slack off, or did you stay on point with that?
Stayed on point with it. In fact, getting my knee feeling better helped me sleep better. Because it was literally, if I would, when you're in your sleep and you twist, and it's like, that would wake you up.
Yeah.
So when that went away, I was sleeping better. I stayed on point with my nutrition. And friends of mine who are listening to me make that statement. So my nutrition is the food that we eat at home, thanks to my wife, is always on point for nutrition.
There you go.
The problem is I have a lot of free time and unlimited access.
I was going to say, I'm an adult. I have money in a car.
Exactly. And, one of the questions you had asked before this was, were you aware of nutrition when you were younger, whatever? And we were, but I have kind of always been a sugar addict. So my mom always made good food for us.
Same thing, you just grew up.
Right. And I mean, there were 9 of us. I was one of 9 kids, so it's not like we went out a lot or anything like that. So it was always food that we had at home. But I had a paper route, and that generated money, and it was right by a grocery store, and there were...
I had $10 every 3 days.
Oh, right. And so, similar here. But I stayed... so I mostly eat really well. I just have to kind of keep myself from the cookie jar is the thing. And that stayed pretty much on. And I tried to do cardio. I could row... if I limited my range on rowing, I could row fine. I could do a bike fine. So I tried to keep at least some of that, and I tried to keep my strict strength up, with presses and things like that didn't bother my knee. And I've never. I think there's some athletes who would have to struggle with their weight if they're not. And I'm lucky enough that that's not really my weight stays the same. Pretty easily.
Yeah.
So it was just a matter of getting rid of the pain, and apparently getting rid of the pain is more important than having done hundreds more box jumps or something like that. Yeah.
How is that like after going through that, how has that impacted your thoughts on training for the coming season now?
So it's impacted it a lot. Before, I would do a WOD with a class, and then I would have hours and hours of, sometimes I would get specific
Break out the notebook.
Yeah, well, yeah, or I would pay to have somebody give me supplemental programming to do. And I remember during the shutdown, so my wife, I have a decent gym at home, and I remember my wife making some sort of a comment about how many hours do you, and it's like I do this every day. You're,
Right.
you're
just seeing it now.
You're seeing it. And I don't do that anymore. I go now. I'm doing a specific thing for weightlifting, and then I'm doing some specific things for cardio machines, occasional running, things like that. Yeah, things like that. And then I'm trying to do skill work, and then I'm not one of those people who can just be off on my own. You'll do the right thing. All you have to do is say, "Hey, Mark, there's a class," and I'll go, "Okay," because I just
you like to move.
I like to move and interact with other people who are moving.
Yeah,
and it's better for me that way. So I'm doing a lot less volume and intensity than I did before, and the WODs are becoming kind of the fun thing that I do.
Yeah, in
addition to my other training, but it's definitely much less. I've got, I was not so good on the warm up, and I just have never really.
You're like a jump into it.
I just sort of jumped into it, and it's the story that I tell my classes is that so there's a bunch of like banded walks things you can do. You probably had your guys do them, and I just always thought those were the dumbest thing. And we would have them sometimes at my gym, and I go, yeah. Well, and my knees bothering me and all that, and we go to the doctor, we go to the PT, and first movement the PT has me do the banded walk stuff, and she goes, "Well, here's why." And I'm thinking, for free, I could if I would have been doing this all along.
I would have been much better off.
I would have been much better off. So now I've got a regular kind of warm up mobility routine I do. I'm not perfect about it, but I'm pretty regular with it. And if the less perfect I am, the more I start to notice little niggling pains. So it's kind of pain is getting me to do what I should have done
the whole time.
The whole time.
Let's take it back for a second. You were talking about like 2019 was kind of the start of the journey, right? Like back then when you made it to Granite Games, like before you competed and maybe after you competed, if they were two different things, was the goal to keep progressing up kind of like you did, or were you just like jumping into it like we'll see what happens?
So initially it was just to see what happens, and then it was kind of like I never developed this really big grand plan.
Grand scheme, yeah.
That was fun. I mean, not just from the competing and all that, which was absolutely fun enough, but the guys that I'm competing with are interesting guys. They're from Hawaii. They're from Arkansas. They're from Michigan. And I've stayed friends with them.
Yeah.
I've literally we've got group chats with all of them that are constant, and it's this amazing group of guys that I hope I'll be lifelong friends with.
Right.
And I thought, well, let's go. What's the next thing?
Right. Let's keep going.
And then which MFCC was, because that was the year they didn't have Masters at the Games. That's 2020, right?
2020, that was Eamon's first year, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have Masters at the Games, and so MFCC kind of said, well, we'll
do it.
Take it. So they invited all the Masters who had qualified for the Games. A lot of them turned it down because this was still pandemic, and where's Fort Wayne, Indiana, and whatever. And then they had qualifiers for
to fill the
rest, and I made it in there. And again, another amazingly positive experience. Other than when I got home that week, I had COVID. That was the only time I've gotten COVID. So that was great. And what I've always said is I could never make myself say that my goal was to go to the games because I just thought it was so ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like, and my goal is also to have the Eagles draft me at outside linebacker. And it's like, it's not.
I would be D-tackle just
personally. You'd be a D-tackle.
Yeah, personally, if I could have a dream.
I can see you taking on Malata.
Oh my God! Speaking of, the Eagles. Wait, are you an Eagles fan?
Yeah.
Living on Delaware, the offense and the defense finally clicking the other night, Sunday night. Oh my God, such a beautiful thing.
It really did look good.
Such a beautiful thing there.
So I never could make myself say that was my goal, but that was always in the back of my mind. Is these guys? I was competing against guys who had gone to the games,
right?
And the games guys were beating me, but I was beating them in some events.
You were in the race.
And I thought, hey, I'm in the race here, and kind of worst case, even if I don't ever make it, the journey's fun.
Yeah.
So I'll keep trying to plug away at it and all that, and then so then it was Legends in 2021, if I've got that right. And then I did MFCC again. And then last year I was going to do Legends again when it was at Mayhem, but that's when my knee was really kind of bothered, so I judged it.
Yeah.
And just a side note, because I know you've done your share of judging as well.
Yeah.
If your knee is hurting you and you have a choice of whether to compete or not, don't judge.
Don't judge. I actually just look back at like one of the first judges packets I got, and like one of the specific things they say is bring like knee sleeves or some kind of like wrap like that. It's rough, man, because when you're at the bigger events, they want you to present in a certain way, which is usually kneeling, you know.
Correct.
As long as when you're counted is for like squats and stuff like that.
Correct. It's literally, so at Legends that year was 4 days long.
Yeah.
And we met every morning at 6:30, and for the first 3 days we got out of there at like 8 o'clock at night.
Oh.
And it was basically that many hours of walking lunges.
Yeah.
Because you're never not down on one knee.
Ugh.
And
it's a lot. People, if you never judged before, judging is a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's rewarding.
Yeah.
It's fun, and it's exciting and all that, I think. But it's physically, when you compete 2 times or 3 times or whatever in a day.
You're genuinely working out a lot less than your training time.
Correct.
For most people that train.
Correct. And you're resting the rest of the time.
Yeah.
When you're judging.
You're going.
Right. And events almost never have excess judges.
Yeah.
They usually have just barely enough.
I've never been to one.
Right.
Never. I put on one event here that I had an excess judges, and that was it. And only lasted for the first event and a half.
Yeah, right.
That was it. And then they disappeared. That's what happens.
Yeah, no, exactly. So anyway, that was, I judged at that Legends event, and then...
Funny enough, I'm going to have Paul's going to be this week's episode from Green Beret, the team lead. Yeah, he's going to be this week's episode coming out this Friday, and then you'll be the following week.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, and Paul, have you been there both years?
I've been there both years.
Yeah, me too. So Paul's been the head judge both years, and then like the first year they had myself and Yamaris as the... remember we had that split rig?
Oh, yeah.
And so I kind of led
2 different
4
sides,
lanes, and she led the other. And then, but yeah, so no, Paul's
he's great.
He is great.
He was a great combo.
About to get married.
Yeah. He just did what was it called, MacFest last weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we recorded last week, 2 weeks ago, something like that. So his episode dropped this Friday.
Oh, cool.
Just about his experiences in CrossFit, like similar to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of the CrossFit athletic journey to this point.
Yeah. So you were talking about, like, you didn't want to say it out loud, right? Because, like, when you put it in the universe, it's like, all right, now it's really out there.
Yeah.
So what was it like for you as it started to become more and more real this year? Like, you made it through quarterfinals, which you've been through before. Then you make it to the semis, and you're like, okay, I'm doing well. What was that whole thing like?
It was like, I can't believe it. Because, I mean, I was like, 7th or 8th, then... I think it was 8th in the Open. And then I was 5th in the quarterfinals until I got the letter saying there's giving you a penalty.
Yeah.
And that dropped me to like 26th or something. But still, that's, okay. And I hadn't been to the semifinals before. But I looked at the workouts and I thought, I think I'm decent at these movement. And it's like, it was just the short answer to your question was a day after day of, I can't believe this is kind of happening.
This is still going, yeah.
And, I remember they put up the initial results, and I was in the top 10. And then they said they were going through video reviews. And I remember when they finally said, it's finalized. And even at that point, I was kind of going, it was so surreal.
Yeah.
I talked to another guy who had gone the year before for the first time. And he said, I know exactly what you mean. It just didn't seem real to me. He goes, and then all of a sudden, when I got to Madison, and when you get there, they fit you out with all sorts of, and I mean, they've got a locker full of stuff. You got an attendant who works with you, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And he goes, that's when it hit me. It's like this, and he goes, and this guy was like a Marine and he had tattoos and all, and he's going, God, to me, I started getting emotional. And,
that's hard work paying off,
Yeah.
in front of you.
It is. So yeah, it just felt like, I can't believe this is happening. And, but very excited. And again, I've got a great community of people who all of a sudden they were like, I ended up with, I think 11 people going,
out there with you.
Yeah. And they not all were from the Rib, but I think like 8 or 9 from the Rib. And then I had another one of my competitors come out just to watch me.
That's
and then
awesome.
we had a girl from a gym that I sometimes work out with here. She
Yeah.
came. It was like all these people, and they're buying T-shirts to try to help because some of the people need a little bit of help.
Right.
And it's like, wow.
Yeah, the community's back.
This is me, yeah.
That's like what you started off in when you went there for just the 1 month. It's
Correct.
the same kind of thing. People supporting you.
Correct.
So I'm sure we could do like a whole nother podcast like about the whole games experience. But tell me like your favorite experience out there in Madison.
And actually, I didn't realize you were going to ask that question, but I've got a ready answer for that one. The last event. And the thing that made the last event special, one, we kind of knew it was the last event. Like, hey, all of us have had this amazing experience. It's our last event together. They gather us we're in one building, which is just the athletes and the coaches.
Yeah.
They gather you, they make sure you got your thing on your ankle, whatever, for timing. And then they walk you to the building where they're going to have it. And as you come into that building, there's a kind of indoor-outdoor section where they've got a great big projection screen that has what's going on inside projected up there. And people can get water and cool off and stay out of the sun and all that. And as you come in as a group, the whole place stands up and gives you a standing ovation. And little kids come over and like they want a high five and they want your autograph and all that. And they're there primarily to see the younger guy, but we're interspersed with them. So,
Right.
Hey, it's CrossFit athletes.
Right.
And so I'm watching, again, little kid, they want their pictures taken with you. They want all this. And it was like, this is like overwhelming. And then ESPN was going to be broadcasting. So you go in there and they've got the bright lights on
Wow.
and the announcers and all that. And then it was an event that I did well, and I got third in that particular one. And and then you walk out, they gather you, and then you wait and decide who's going to get drug tested and all that. And you walk back out, and then you get applauded again. And as you go out, and it's one of those things where everybody should be lucky enough to have one of those experiences where your friends and family are there cheering for you, people you don't know are cheering for you, and it was just that's amazing. That was the amazing experience for me.
You hear like kind of secondhand all the things they say about the treatment of masters athletes, right? So that's amazing to see that like there is a moment that people do show that how much like the community appreciates you.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that a little bit. I think it's my perspective on how they treated us is this. So first of all, I mentioned getting fitted out for
all the swag,
shirts and all the swag and all that. I got the same exact things that Brent Fikowski got.
Nice.
Okay, so you get called back there. There's a locker. It looks like an NFL person's locker. It's got your T-shirts with your names hung up on it. It's got your shorts with your names on it, with your numbers on it. The tights, and the 5 pairs of shoes and all this. And you've got an attendant working with it. We get exactly the same stuff that they got. Our competition was 3 days. I think there's 4. I can't.
Something like that.
And, but I think that's appropriate, honestly.
Right.
I also think CrossFit is coming a long ways in how they handle masters. So not too many years ago, I can't remember if it was like 2017, 2018, whatever. I remember there was a workout in the open, and it had handstand push-ups in it. I think it was like you did 55 deadlifts and 55. That was 2017, I think.
17. Did they repeat it? They repeated it both years. It was 55 deadlifts, 55 wall balls, 55 calories on the row, or 55 handstand push-ups.
Right.
And there was no different scaling for you guys, right?
Yeah, there was. And that was my point. We didn't do handstand push-ups. We did shoulders to overhead. Well, that changes it. The guys who will do well in handstand push-ups tend to be the smaller, more gymnastic guys, which is a nice balance to the guys who will do well in
the barbell stuff,
rowing, and rowing and
the weightlifting, which is all the two movements. Yeah,
but now you've just changed a little, and but now they're having us do in the run up to this year's game, from open to quarterfinals to semifinals to games, we did handstand push-ups, we did wall walks, we did handstand hold. That didn't change.
Freestanding, right?
Yep.
There you go.
Yep. And we did handstand walks. So I think they've made it a lot of progress. It's not as easy as just automatically giving us exactly the same moves as everybody else.
It's definitely a science trying to find what's the correct thing to do.
It is
to test the people.
Right. You want to give the people who have those skills a chance to be rewarded for that.
Right.
On the other hand, you don't want to, it's maybe simpler to think of it in a barbell analogy. It would be dumb to give me the same weights to do that you do.
Right.
And I can't pick that stuff up.
Right.
So how do you challenge us to give the guys who have more strength than others a chance to show what they can do, but not overwhelm us? Same thing with the gymnastics movements. But
that changed that workout from the original workout is 2 parts weightlifting, 1 part gymnastic, 1 part monostructural,
right,
to now 3 parts weightlifting, 1 part monostructural.
Right.
So you've changed the test.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was where they were in 2017. And I feel like now we've got, so that last event that I was alluding to in the games, we had to do 10 bar muscle ups, and then it was 45 dumbbell snatches with 50 pounds. The younger masters groups did more. I think they might have done up to 30 bar muscle ups. And then they had up to 70-pound dumbbells, and they had to do squat snatches, not just power snatches, whatever. But I think that was fair. I think that gave us a chance to, I think it allowed for separation within our gang, who could do those movements, who couldn't. But it wasn't overwhelming. If you would have given us 70-pound dumbbells and told us we had to do dumbbell squat snatches, nobody can do those. On the other hand, if you would have watered it down to where we were doing,
it would have been too simple.
Something, it would have been too simple and it would have separated. So I feel like it's coming along.
Yeah.
And I know that there's some sort of a group that meets in that.
Some kind of war room of people that,
and including, they've got, a guy named, again, Del LaFountain, I've mentioned his name a couple times here. He sits on a group where they talk about the programming for masters.
Yeah.
And I think they're listening to guys like him who does this. I think they're getting better and better at programming that.
That's good to hear. So in a similar vein, do you have any big thoughts or opinions on just genuinely, what do they call it, online qualifiers, like the quarterfinals, semifinals? Was the Masters semifinals online?
Yeah.
Do you have any big thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the first thought I'd make is probably, it might be an unpopular opinion. I actually thought that they did a better job programming this year than, I like Dave Castro. I think Dave Castro has done an amazing job.
Yeah.
But I actually thought the programming for the older Masters was better this year.
Yeah.
There have been some years where...
in semifinals, quarter, the whole season.
Kind of through the whole thing. I guess what I'm saying is it was a very thorough test. If you made it through the open, quarterfinals, the semifinals, you had to do...
a lot of different things.
You had to do ring muscle-ups, you had to do bar muscle-ups, you had to do handstand stuff, you had to move weights in every different kind of thing imaginable. It was a well-rounded test. There have been other years when it was just all engine. And again, for the older masters group. So they would take, younger masters would maybe have a reasonable test, but then they would change pistols to box step-ups for us or, whatever. And it would become kind of more of just a test of engine.
Right.
And there was one year where they had it was some sort of a snatches thing. And it was like, for the guys who were 54 or under, they had to snatch like 155. And then for us, it was like 115. Or something, and I'm going, well, wait a minute.
It's a very different workout.
We shouldn't be doing 155.
Yeah, but, there's something in between those
There's
things.
something in between.
Yeah.
And again, I think they're kind of getting that down. Now, directly toward your question, online qualifiers are a lot.
Yeah.
So the head coach at my gym obviously went through the judges course because she was going to have to judge an awful lot of people. As we got ready for the quarterfinals and semifinals, she couldn't be there. I mean, she's got a family and a life and all that. So I had 2 others of my friends went through the judges course solely for the purpose of being able to help judge me because you had to have certified judges for things. And it can be a 15-minute workout or a 10-minute workout, and you can spend literally an hour and a half
longer
setting up stuff ahead of time.
I thought you were going to say just on the judges course because there's also that before. There's that. And then, the setup beforehand. Oh, man.
Yeah, well, this year's judges course, we can probably do a separate podcast on that one. But yeah, setting up ahead of time, you have to be able to show all your measurements and all, and it's an awful lot.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I like the fact that we have to have something like that. I think it's a very fair question. Does it make sense to have both quarterfinals and semifinals, especially for the older masters groups where the numbers are not as big?
Right.
So you go 10%. So the top 10% of the open go to the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
So in my case, there's like 1,500, something like that. So that drops down to 150. Then the top 30 go to semifinals. Then the top 10 go to games. Do you really need 2 layers to sort that out?
Yeah.
And I'm
So what would you take out semis and have people go from quarters to
maybe just have quarters. Well, it's kind of like the old age group qualifier that they used to have.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that what they did with the quarters and the semis is bad.
Yeah.
I'm just saying might be worth reviewing. Is that better, or is it better for just the age group qualifiers?
Right.
Now, 35 to 39, that's a different deal. There's like 30,000 people in there. So now you're going down to 3,000. Yeah, I don't know. Should they do something different? Should they have a different number of qualifiers? Those are the types of things I'm hoping somebody's looking into.
Because with the open division model, you're going to have a number of different events for those semifinals to sort out from a much bigger pool. So like the Masters one, do you do it online regionally too? Or do you have something else where like either more guys could get through or you cut out a step, something like that? Those are people that have never played an event before. An event the scale of the games with this many people, it's hard to figure out what's the perfect combination or concoction of logistics. It's just what it's going to be.
Yeah, I know. And I guess I would put it this way: I would have no problem if they had exactly the same arrangement next year.
Yeah.
I would also be willing to have them say, you know what, for Masters, we're going to go open qualifier games, and that's that.
Would you want more people to get through like that? Like, would you bump it up to like what they maybe had before and go closer to what the games people are, like 20 per division? I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm an advocate for Masters, obviously, and so the short answer is I would like to see more go. What do I think is fair? I think, say, for my group, if the number, so right now the number is 10. It's been 20 before, and they kind of did a cut, and so you could do that. So I wouldn't mind seeing 20 for my group, but I think also if you're going to do say 20 for my group, for the 35 to 39s, where you've got orders of magnitude more people, they should have more people going, right?
Maybe 20 for you, 30 for them, something like that. But, but definitely do more for them.
But I think so. Because to go being 30,000 people going for 10 spots is,
I mean, it's kind of like proof positive. Just look at the people that we had shooting in that division this year. Like, look at how that immediately just became, like an all-star division, from your Brian Wongs to Easy to Sam Dancer, Rich, that didn't even go, But look at all the people that we had in that one, the big names and all that stuff.
And I look at somebody like a Chris Clyde,
right?
Not this. Can't remember what place he got this year. The year before he got 12th.
Yeah.
And I'm 12th out of 30,000. That's games worthy.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right.
It really is.
Yeah. To be placing that high. So with that season behind you, and now you're gearing back up, like, what are you hungry for? What's the goals for next year?
So, 2 big goals in CrossFit, and for the moment, CrossFit's a pretty big part of my life. So, first goal is that level 2 that I mentioned that I got right here at King of Prussia expires next August. I'd like to get my level 3.
Heck yeah.
So, right now I've just kind of started looking at it, and it looks like an infinite amount of information, and it's been a really long time since I was in college. So, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Back to what we talked about early on. One route would be to say, "Oh yeah, well, I'm old. I haven't studied in a while." No, screw that.
Right, dive into it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
You don't know what you can do until you try. So I'm hungry for that, and I'm trying to get all set up for that. I'm not sure when I'll take the test. It has to be obviously by August. I may take it, like, say, I don't know, in February or something. I haven't really thought that out, but I do want to get that. And then the other thing is to make it back to the games. It was such a positive experience for me, and I think it was a very positive experience for my community and all that. And because, the people who went seemed to really have a good time, and the community enjoyed supporting it. It was the last year in Madison. Wouldn't it be cool to go to the first year in wherever?
Yeah.
They're saying Fort Worth, but that didn't look like they had enough days to include Masters.
Yeah,
so
I was curious about that.
We'll see where that goes. But I would love to be able to go back again.
Yeah.
It gets harder every year. Last year there were 3 guys on the podium. Only one of them made it back in, and he got 9th out of 9.
Wow.
This year, so it gets tougher every year. But
I think you got
the challenge.
Yeah. If everyone could do it, then it wouldn't be a sweep.
That's right.
That's awesome,
That's
man.
right.
Well, Mark, it's been an awesome episode. It's been a great conversation, man. I feel like I need to have you back on just because I feel like there's so many more things to talk about with you, this conversation. But do you have any last minute things you want to say to the people here at the end of the episode?
Well, no, first of all, to you, thanks for having me on. This is my first podcast experience, so I was kind of nervous coming in.
Didn't seem like it, man. It's great.
Yeah, you did, and love to come back anytime. And I guess for the people out there, what I would say is I basically started doing CrossFit regularly when I was 58, and look at how much what kind of shape I've been able to get into, the amount of fun I've been able to have, the number of friends I've been able to meet, and now I'm back to doing things with my brain, like trying to get a level 3.
Yeah.
Don't think it's too late. It's not.
Right.
Come back.
Don't let yourself just slow down too early.
Yeah.
All right, dogs. It's been another great episode. Peace.